Martin, Anthony Gordon, we understand, has been nowhere to be seen in recent days. At Finch Farm, it was expected he and the other Everton players would pitch up for work, but he hasn't. We understand now this morning he has. He has arrived. So maybe on the day that Dyche gets appointed manager at Everton, Anthony Gordon has been back in and around the scene. You know, when you talk about matters like this, no doubt, did you ever have an experience like this when you were at Arsenal? Obviously, you never did such a thing, Martin, and you had a few moves with Everton and Villa and whatnot. But a player seemingly agitating for a move, does it ever end well?
Well, I mean, I've seen players, position themselves, but never seen anyone never turn up for work. I mean, I always feel that's almost unforgivable because particularly when Everton are where they are, he's just a young boy who's an Evertonian fan. I find it hard to believe that he does not prepare. I mean, I looked at his journey, just tried a little on the train, Jim, sat on it for long enough. I had a little look to see when he last really started a game. I think he started the games just after the World Cup on Boxing Day. Then he hasn't really featured. Now, whether or not there's been a falling out with the manager, a decline in his performance, there's been a few injuries, but whatever you do, you turn up for work, and he hasn't done that. So it's almost unforgivable. He has to build bridges. Sean Dyche, one of his first jobs will be to try and get him back on board. I'm pretty certain of that. Whether they see this, though, as an opportunity to cash in, to get a little bit of money in, Everton now not particularly strong financially anymore. Can he be the catalyst to maybe bring players? Is there enough time, Jim? I suspect not, to do some business. It's about really getting everybody back on board to play and give their best for Everton, and he needs to do that quickly. You're
a top pro, Martin. Would you look at the likes of Anthony Gordon in any different way if you were in that Everton dressing room today?
Not really. I think
you've got to come to your work, Anthony.
I think you get, it's like you give people a fool's pardon, don't you? You want everybody back on board. Everyone's got their individual issues.
Yep.
We don't know how Frank treated him, whether it was a big falling out. He wanted to go to Chelsea, talk of a big... That's turned his head for clearly. Now there's talk of Newcastle. That's turning his head as well. He's got a football club where he is. He just needs to concentrate and do his best where he is right now.
I mean, the talk about Newcastle is probably the reason that he's staying away. But you would think, well, he can't affect that talk. So why not go to Finch Farm? We will find out the reasons in the fullness of time. I mentioned Virgil van Dijk earlier on. He, when he was at Southampton and Liverpool was very, very hot in his trail, Virgil van Dijk, who I consider to be the most consummate of consummate professionals, ended up training on his own. I mean, it can surprise you how the paths that these stories take.
Yeah, but Van Dijk had been around the block.
Yeah.
He'd been in Scotland. Lots of people took a look at him. It was a life-changing opportunity for him, of course. Gordon's seeing the same thing, but he's only a young boy. He's just developing, growing into the game. We don't really know yet how good he's going to be. There's not that consistency there was with Van Dijk. It's never right, though, to down tools and say you're not going to play. I mean, you don't want that.
Well, we don't know if he's done that. We don't know if he's done that, but certainly he has been conspicuous by his absence, although he has turned up today. You wonder, Simon, that fans don't believe for a moment everything they hear. I mean, in November 2021, Gordon joins Everton. It means everything to me and my family because I'm a local lad. This is my city. It's where I'm born. I was brought up here watching Everton and dreaming of doing what I'm doing now. So to finally be doing it, it couldn't be much better. Well, fine. But you are still an Everton player.
Yeah.
You're not at Newcastle yet.
No. I mean, I would suspect he probably meant that when he said it, but that's about as deep as it goes, because once an opportunity that comes along that's better, most players, not all, will look at themselves rather than their obligations to the position that they find themselves. The other players in the dressing room have got no business dealing with what Anthony Gordon does and doesn't. They've got enough problems of their own to worry about because they're not exactly turning up. But I do think that if indeed he has been staying away, let's hope Keir Direction is not his agent, but if he has been staying away, then and doing it in defiance of the ideal of supporting the team, then it's out of order and not necessary. And not part of what it should be. And people should call it out. The PFA should call it out. People that are supposed to represent people properly, because it's a two-way transaction. Now, we don't know. Frank, you would have thought, being a central midfield player, being a person that works with young players and started working at Derby by taking all the young players from Chelsea and then had that year at Chelsea where he pretty much only had young players to work with and brought a lot of them through, you would have thought that he would have been the ideal person to have communicated with Anthony Gordon. So it's surprising to find that there's a relationship that's seemingly, I might add, breaking down. Maybe he's been watching Mick Lynch on TV and following The Nation, thinking everyone should go on strike. But it doesn't bode well. It doesn't look good, and it shouldn't be tolerated.
It's behaviour, isn't it? You have to carry yourself in a certain way as these young men.
The PFA is not going to call it out. The PFA represents players.
These young players are pampered so much because they're on a pedestal all the way through their life. You know, from the minute they start to play football, they're separated within their own families. You know, Jemima doesn't do netball because Jimmy has to go and play football. Do you know? And he's there, he's catered for. Every need is catered for. And how do you then have a normal type personality who can accept things when they don't get their way? This is almost like spoilt child behaviour.
But that's parenting as well. Ultimately,
it is. The clubs have to parent in the right way.
Parents have to be in the right place and right space. And most of the young men that are coming through football now are slightly more grounded. It is. I do accept, because I can be quite harsh. I do accept that if you're put in a position of enormous wealth, instantaneously, you know, grown men singing your name from the terraces, it can be head-turning. It can be changing of direction. That's why you need...
If you're allowed it to be.
Well, I think anyone that's a young man can be in that position. But also, if you don't have the right people around you giving you the right messages, then you will get carried away.
And Sean Dyche can be really important now for this player's career.
I think so.
To get him right back on the right track first. Behave yourself. Get in line. And let's see what you can do and help this football club to stay up.
I can imagine what you would have done, Simon.
Oh, yeah, of course you can imagine, because it probably would have been the case. But what Sean Dyche needs to do is decide whether that player's worth turning around, or the actual money that you might be able to get for him might be redeployed somewhere else. Because I'm sure Sean Dyche must have been doing some looking around at what Everton might be, what they could be, and what they might need to replace. And if they can't go into the transfer market without having to sell first, and they can get proper money for Anthony Gordon, and by proper money I mean probably in their view closer to 40 million than 30, then it gives Sean Dyche a fighting fund to be able to redistribute in the side.
Yeah.
Ideally, you'd like a fit and focused, functioning, committed Anthony Gordon in your side because he's a good player.
I mean, some of the most passionate, if I can describe them as that, Martin, Evertonians rounded on Gordon in the street, as well as Gordon, one or two other players, and gave him an earful. Now, that probably wasn't to his liking, but it shouldn't affect his thinking at this time.
Well,
it should be all hands to the pump until his situation changes, if indeed it is going to change before Tuesday at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it ends up at Newcastle. He might not, so if he doesn't, it's pretty tough to say.
I think, you know, Sean Dyche sitting down with the players, I talked about this before, about meeting needs, talking to players, find out what's going on. What character have I got in front of me? Is it bad? Can we repair the damage?
Yeah.
Okay, no. Right. Antonio might be available at West Ham. There are options. Let's get into... I don't know how Sean Dyche is... He's not really that prolific in the transfer market, having said that, but he's a different club. This is Everton now. So maybe it is. Maybe his first step is to spend some of that money and get the player out. So a lot of thinking to do for the manager immediately, and he's got to go to work quickly. One assumes, Jim, he'd have had one eye on the job and one eye on the team for the last number of weeks.
Well, I mean, I'll be interested to hear from Anthony Gordon as and when he next speaks, because we don't know the full story to it. And to give him the benefit of the doubt, he's maybe got his reasons for not having been at Finch Farm. But it does leave you scratching your head somewhat that he would choose to stay away, although he is, as I say, I emphasise, he's back this morning.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.